What is up, boys and girls of YouTube? So today I'm bringing you a warding guide. I've been talking about basically wanting to learn the meta, wanting to know what was going on, wanted to know how everything was going to be played, and we're getting to a point where I feel like I have an understanding of the gods that should be played, where warding is, what the meta is forming for now at least. We'll see how that changes, obviously, over time. But for now, I want to jump into a warding guide, and we're going to go right into warding as a jungler, simply because that's what that's the role I play. So right now you have a lot of different areas to look at, right? You've got your speed buff area, which is quite a large area, but far away. You have a lot of angles coming in and out of that speed buff area. So your junglers are going to be pathing next to the harpies, to the left, to the right of the harpies by the blue. That's all on Soul's side of the map. And then if you look even farther in, you've got basically 3 pathways leading through the jungle by Fire Giant. And then on the other side of the map, you've got your back harpies where you can easily ward and cover. It's really hard to get coverage in here around the red and purple buff. You're looking at a ton of angles, ton of corners, so it's hard to ward in this area and have full coverage. And then you've got the same situation here. Gold Fury is split into 2. You've got mid harpies, which is a wide area, so there's a lot to cover for you as a jungler, or you as anyone just trying to ward for your team. To start with, as a jungler, you are the only person who can safely and easily ward very deep in the jungle aside from your support. But your support is going to be focused on defensively warding to keep your team alive, while you're going to be focused on warding to know where the other jungler is and to ward to be aggressive. So early game, especially in like the, I want to say like 3 to 8 minute mark, my wards are heavily focused in these areas, because if you know that they're in one of those 2 areas, you know what side of the map has to be safe. You know instantly, okay, hey, Soul Laner, be careful. He's on that side of the map. He just did his speed buff, which means he's probably going to drop a blue buff, and he'll be around you. So don't do anything dumb. Same thing on the other side. If he's at left, that means he has nothing to do over here on the right side of the map. So you will see him looking to gank ADC or looking to put some pressure in the mid. Easy peasy, right? Now, as a jungler, you obviously have a ton of pathing. There isn't that much you can do to cover every single thing for somebody. So that's where your teammates are going to come in. Obviously, these are not the only places you ward. As the game changes, my wards change, or based on what my team isn't doing. If we're being defensive, or it's just hard for me to get in their jungle, I will ward in this area all the time, because you get a little bit of coverage. I will ward right around the red buff, either here or here. It's less likely to be counter warded, as are these. Really, really good wards. Now, your mid laner is going to be really important for pretty much the whole game for you as a jungler, or for you as a mid laner to stay alive. The map is really big. It's very, very easily for you to get ganked, to get pressured over the mids, from the side, underneath, however you want to look at it. As a mid, you have to be warding in these areas. You don't have a choice. Realistically, even this last ward, you might want that here if your jungler is not warding here. If your jungler is warding deeper in this area, then you might want to move it over here. It's kind of your situation. But for sure, you want this pathway covered so you can't get wrapped on. If you can avoid being wrapped on, it does a lot. Now, that's more offensive or more for lane clear, especially early. If you're being stomped into the ground, you might want to get some deeper ward, or some defensive wards here. Sorry, defensive wards here. Really easy. Those are defensive wards. Those aren't something you're going to focus on. Like I said, these are your 2 main priority wards as a mid. If you are not holding these wards down, you will die a lot more than you used to, 100%. As a support, your situation is a little bit different. You're kind of, like I said, being defensive, being support wards. You're trying to cover whoever's being ganked a lot. You're trying to cover whoever's being the most aggressive, and you're just trying to protect your team. If your mid's not covering these wards, you can cover these 2 wards for your team. Pretty unlikely for you to ward anywhere on this side of the map early game. You're going to be heavily focused on the left side of the map because you're in lane a lot. So you're looking at cover wardage here and here if you really want to. More than likely, unless they have a global ult, you're going to be warding right here so you don't see any ganks. And your ADC is going to look at warding in this area here to cover himself, right? That ward can be shifted over a little bit. If you have those 2 spots warded, it's going to be really hard for someone to path through. Very unlikely to get through without knowing, right? Like, how often is your team not going to see them path in this area with all these wards if you're warding correctly? I want to jump back to supports because you're covering defensively for the ADC. You can cover aggressively on the red buff if your jungler is not already doing so. This will allow you to know when to invade, because invading red and purple is actually a pretty big deal in this meta. If your mid's not covering this ward, cover it for them. And other than that, you want to hold these areas as well. They're really good. More than likely, I'll be warding purple because it'll cover a gank area. It'll also cover that buff. Kind of nice. Really easy to use. Now, like I said, this is defensive. As the game shifts and you start looking at Gold Furies, you're going to be warding the Gold Fury to cover the pit, counter ward, all that stuff. You're going to be helping warding here because it's going to be heavily warded spots. You're going to have to counter ward this. You're going to have to regular ward this. You're going to have to do everything. If you're unable to control any spots, you don't have the counter wards, put your regular wards over a little bit more, a little bit higher, like here. If you're able to put your wards higher, they're less likely to be counter warded. When you shift over to Fire Giant side of the map, and that's where your focus is, you're obviously counter warding Fire Giant, really big, counter warding Portal Demon, really big. You can usually cover a lot of the zone with that ward right there. You'll also be warding aggressively when you're pushing those objectives. This area, this area, this area, this area. You have a lot to cover as a support. You just have to base it based on what your team is doing or where you see the wards dropping from the other team. Now you go into as a solo laner. You're pretty much warding nowhere. Unless you're getting farmed, you're not warding. Now, if you're getting farmed, cover this area early so you can't get ganked. Cover this area early so you can't get ganked. You cover both angles, easy peasy. You're not getting Thor ulted. You're not getting Rat ulted. You're not having people come around without knowing it. This also covers when they're going to do blue buff. It does a lot for you, but it's very unlikely you need a ward till late game. Late game, you're just helping your ward coverage. Fire Giant, late game, covering. Gold Fury, if you rotate, covering. You've got a lot of areas to cover right now. Now, please, that's like your overall ward coverage, right? That's, hey, this is where I need to drop my wards as this role, right? Obviously, you can help your teammates out. I'm not saying junglers only fucking ward this area, right? I'm not saying junglers only ward these 5 areas. No, you still help your teammates out. They can afford wards or their shit gets counter warded. Obviously, you're not going to drop your wards there. If you are a jungler, these are mainly regular ward areas. Your counter wards are going to drop in these high populated areas. They're going to counter ward mid harpies because it allows you to gank. You're going to counter ward gank spots on the ADC role. So if you know they're warding right here, counter ward that bitch. If your team's trying to go for a Gold Fury, counter ward that bitch. If you're trying to pressure and look for an easy gank on red and they're defending it with wards, counter ward it. It's okay. You're not wasting it. You're just trying to get yourself an advantage based on vision, which is what people fail to understand. Now that you understand the basic stuff, right? Your warding times are going to vary in these roles. Obviously, I said mid lane and jungle and support are going to need to cover this stuff. As an ADC, if you're just dumpstering your lane, ward aggressively, ward high, keep them out of this area so you can play up in lane. Same for the solo. If you really want to push your guy on the tower but you think you can die, ward higher, ward up in this area, ward where they can't, so they can't stop you. So if they're coming, you can run away, and if they're not coming, you can just W key at whoever you want. It does a lot for you. It's very, very good to do those things. So this is your basic ward coverage. That's simple. Things might change, but the biggest thing to remember is angles and corners are a whole lot different. Putting a, let me drop to, what color can I do? Let me use light blue. So dropping a ward, say right here, is pointless. That shit's going to be angled out. It's literally going to cover this area right here. Not quite that big. More like this angle right there. That's all you're going to see. You're not going to get a flared out ward as you would here. Or if you ward right here, you're not going to get this flared out ward that's going to cover more. Or even if you ward in the mid harpies, you're not going to get this flare. Like, these areas are bad to ward. You need to make sure you're warding in the open areas. You're warding here. You're warding here. You're warding here. You're warding where it's open and it can see all angles. You don't want to miss out on angles, and take your time learning the spots. Because say you want to drop a ward right here to cover all of this, right? But you move it up a little bit. That little bit of difference will allow junglers to squeak by. People can squeak by that shit, and it happens more often than you realize. Please pay attention to where you're dropping wards. You'll learn a lot. You'll notice from this, the biggest change I've seen, I don't like having a ward in mid lane, as the lane is so fucking big that you can't see them actually leave this side of the map, or you can't see them actually leave that side of the map. And it makes it really, really, really hard to follow where someone's going, ganking, fighting, or going for objectives based on that ward that's right here. I really don't drop it anymore. Mid laners might, but I don't think it's going to be common. I think you need the coverage in the jungle because there's so much pathing that has to be covered. It's very difficult. So hopefully this guide helps you guys. I know other people are making ward guides and they're giving you your take on it. I promise you, if you ward like this and you base your warding like this and you do it based on the times I'm talking about, where as a jungler at 2 minutes in, you have these deep wards, you will see a larger win percentage based on that than you will just knowing these spots and having no times, than not knowing why you're doing it. Make sure you understand the reasoning. You get advantages off of this, and you get, whether it be offensive or defensive, you keep your team alive or you're able to go for a gank. It opens up a lot for you as a jungler, for a mid laner, support. Everybody can move around freely because of the different vision that they're giving their team. So remember that, boys and girls. Get to your conquest, get to your warding, win some games.